On this Friday night, a mistrial declared in a high-profile criminal case. Why the sexual assault trial of 5 former World Junior hockey players,
it's really incredibly unfortunate for everyone,
starts all over again with a brand new jury. The final push for votes.
I was afraid to have to buy flowers for the funeral of the Liberal Party.
With the Liberals and NDP in Ontario and the Conservatives out west. A Russian general killed in a bombing near Moscow as Donald Trump's special envoy is at the Kremlin for peace talks. And the pilgrimage for a final farewell. Dignitaries and the faithful arrive in Rome for the funeral of Pope Francis on Saturday.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Colleen Christie.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with a stunning development at the sexual assault trial of 5 former World Junior hockey players. The judge in a London, Ontario courtroom declared a mistrial this morning and the jury was released. Global National's Jeff Semple has been covering the twists and turns in this case all week and has our top story tonight.
The 5 defendants, members of Canada's 2018 World Junior Hockey team, arrived in court to learn their sexual assault case is starting over.
For it to go off the rails, that'll be a really difficult moment for everyone.
I'm sorry to have to tell you that I have declared a mistrial in this case, Justice Caroccia told the 14 jurors. As a result of that, this jury is discharged. Thank you very much for your attention and your service, although it was brief. And with that, the proceedings were tossed out and the case begins again. The media can't report on the reason behind the mistrial, at least not yet, because it's covered by a publication ban to avoid tainting the next jury. All we can say is that on Wednesday afternoon, the judge suddenly sent the jury home, telling them something happened over the lunch hour that I need to think about and to discuss with the lawyers. That discussion continued through Wednesday and Thursday before the mistrial was declared.
it's relatively unusual, pretty rare.
Legal experts say a mistrial is a last resort to protect the integrity of the trial.
It means that something's happened that has breached either the evidentiary rules or the professional ethics.
I think it's very surprising news. I think it's unfortunate, but I suspect that the judge was perhaps more inclined to grant it at this very early point in the proceedings.
Indeed, advocates say it's fortunate the alleged victim had not already been called to testify.
The court process is incredibly stressful and often re-traumatizing, and it can be demeaning. And so to be in a situation where that process has started and now has to be restarted is just incredibly hard.
The court is now moving quickly to restart. A new jury has already been selected. The accused have pleaded not guilty, and opening statements are set to go again next week. Colleen?
Jeff Semple in London, Ontario. Thanks, Jeff. To the campaign trail now. With the election just 3 days away, U.S. President Donald Trump continues to insert himself into the conversation. In a wide-ranging interview with Time magazine released to mark his 100th day in office, Trump once again broached the idea of Canada as the 51st state, saying, "I'm really not trolling. We don't need anything from Canada. The only way this thing really works is for Canada to become a state." The Canadian response to Donald Trump's threats and tariffs has become a primary issue in the election. The main party leaders addressed it again today as they make their final pitches to voters. Our coverage begins with Mackenzie Gray and the Liberal campaign.
Hey, how are you? Good.
In a city built on steel, Mark Carney playing defense.
Yeah, thank you.
Trying to hold on to one of the closest ridings in the country.
We will stand with every single Canadian worker targeted by President Trump's attacks on our country.
Carney attempting to sell himself as the best person to defend Canada against the U.S. steel tariffs, as Sault Ste. Marie's largest employer, Algoma, says they're already losing millions of dollars a month.
We're being impacted by the U.S. tariffs on steel to the U.S. 50% of our customer base is in the U.S.
Global News seat projections has the Sioux as a toss-up between the Liberals and Conservatives, just like it was in 2021, when the Liberals won by only 247 votes.
He wants the tax to go higher on Canadian steel.
Leading Pierre Poilievre to head there in the third week of the campaign. But unlike Carney, he didn't voluntarily bring up U.S. tariffs, instead blaming the Liberal leader for any steel troubles.
If this liberal industrial carbon tax is allowed to go ahead, there will be no Algoma, there will be no Stelco, there will be no DeFasco.
In the final week of the campaign, it's work hard, play hard, with Carney picking up pizzas, before heading to tight ridings in the Greater Toronto area, building a time capsule with school kids.
We have a new leader.
The Liberals also calling on a party legend to campaign, who thinks Carney has the election in the bag.
You know, 6 months ago I was afraid to have to buy flowers for the funeral of the Liberal Party. Now we'll use them for the celebration on Tuesday morning.
Both main party leaders' visits to the Sioux emblematic of the message of their campaigns. Colleen Poilievre trying to avoid discussing Trump and putting all the blame on the Liberals. Carney running away from Justin Trudeau's record and trying to make the ballot question about the Americans.
Mackenzie Gray in Vaughan, Ontario. Thanks, Mackenzie. The Conservative leader was out making final pitches to voters in Saskatchewan and Alberta today, two provinces that have long been blue strongholds. With polls suggesting support is sliding in the east, it would appear Pierre Poilievre is trying to firm things up on the Prairies before heading further west to battleground BC to reel in any undecided voters there. Touria Izri is following the tail end of the Tory campaign.
To Pierre Poilievre, this election comes down to one word.
Change, change, change.
But for many Canadians, it comes down to one name.
We will obviously call President Trump and tell him that the tariffs are destructive and they should be lifted on day one and a new deal negotiated.
Poilievre took questions for a final time this campaign and was asked how he would handle Donald Trump differently.
We need to take direct action to end the tariff chaos with a position of strength, not by spreading lies to exaggerate, as Mr. Carney has done.
It's a call to action that we need.
Liberal leader Mark Carney did not mention that Trump raised his desire to make Canada the 51st state during their first phone call.
What's most important in a discussion, a meeting, is the conclusions of the meeting.
If Poilievre can defy the polls and beat Carney, he says he would keep MPs sitting to pass legislation on affordability, job creation, and crime.
We are going to keep Parliament open all summer long.
But it's not clear how that would work in a minority government.
Here we are in the Prairies again.
The Conservative leader is also pledging to stand up for the West. Poilievre played to his Prairie base,
Saskatchewan!
holding rallies in Calgary and Saskatoon. His supporters say the choice is obvious.
I have to work a second job, right? And it's a real struggle, right? So we're desperate for a change in this country.
He just talks the sense that people talk.
He's going to fix our country. You know, Carney's going to destroy us.
Poilievre's next stop is Nanaimo, BC, part of his push to fortify the West, with polls suggesting his eastern support is in doubt. Colleen?
Touria Izri in Saskatoon, thank you. Jagmeet Singh's NDP is trailing badly in the polls, but today Singh insisted he has no regrets about not triggering an election last fall when polling data suggested the Conservatives were in the lead and his party was fighting for second place with the Liberals.
At the time, I could not stomach the idea of Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives forming a majority government. I knew that was going to be bad because of their cuts, because of their division, because of the things they wanted, and I did not want to let that happen.
Singh says not triggering the election last year also gave him the time to see publicly funded dental care through and push for more pharmacare deals with provinces. We will have full coverage of the federal election on Monday. Decision Canada starts at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific on Global and all of our streaming platforms. In the U.S., there is growing concern over the Trump administration's immigration crackdown after federal authorities arrested a judge in Wisconsin. The FBI is accusing her of obstructing the arrest of an undocumented immigrant. Jackson Prosco is following the developments. Jackson.
Colleen, the judge was arrested by the FBI outside the courthouse this morning and charged with 2 felonies. After a brief appearance in federal court, she was released pending arraignment. The Justice Department alleges Judge Hannah Dugan obstructed justice when federal agents arrived to arrest an undocumented immigrant who was appearing in her courtroom last week. According to court documents, after the judge was told immigration agents were waiting outside, she ordered them to go to the Chief Justice's office to discuss the matter. It's alleged the judge then told the undocumented man to leave her courtroom through a jury door so that he could avoid arrest. The government says the suspect made it out of the courthouse and was arrested after a brief chase. The Attorney General says this is proof that no one is above the law, teeing up what appears to be a major escalation in the Trump administration's fight with local authorities over deportations.
This is about the Department of Justice sending a message to everyone, whether it's a judge, a local elected official, local police officers, that if they stand in the way of federal immigration law, there will be consequences, including and up to arrest.
Now, some judges have argued that courthouses should be off limits for immigration arrests because they can discourage undocumented crime victims or witnesses from appearing. During Trump's first term, a Massachusetts judge was indicted on charges of conspiracy to obstruct justice for similarly allowing an undocumented immigrant to avoid federal agents by leaving through the back door of a courthouse. Those charges were eventually dropped. Colleen?
Jackson Prosco in Washington. Thanks, Jackson. A disgraced former U.S. congressman from New York has been sentenced to 87 months in jail. George Santos admitted to deceiving donors and stealing the identities of nearly a dozen people to fund his campaign for public office. He had also made several bogus claims about his upbringing and life story. His lawyers had asked for 2 years behind bars. In Ontario, 2 people have been convicted and sentenced to life in prison for the shooting death of a police officer in 2022. Ontario Provincial Police Constable Greg Piershala was shot dead after responding to a stolen vehicle in a ditch near Brantford. A jury convicted Randall Mackenzie and Brandy Stewart Sperry of first-degree murder. Piershala had joined the force just over a year earlier and was 28 years old. Coming up, a 3-year bloody battle may end in concessions. The pressure to complete a U.S. brokered peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. And Canadian dignitaries paid their respects to Pope Francis the day before his funeral. A day after Israel's military warned of a larger Gaza offensive, the United Nations World Food Programme said it has depleted all of its stocks for Palestinian families after delivering the last of its food to kitchens in Gaza today. Israel has been blocking border crossings, slowing the flow of humanitarian aid. The UN agency warns those kitchens will run out of food in the days ahead, upending what has been a critical lifeline for half the enclave's population, more than 400,000 people. There are growing fears tonight Ukraine will be forced to cede a portion of its land to secure a peace deal with Russia. U.S. President Donald Trump is ramping up pressure on both sides and calling on President Volodymyr Zelensky to accept territorial concessions. Today, Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, met Russian President Vladimir Putin in Moscow hours after a targeted assassination in the region. Vincent McAviney reports.
Just moments after a car bomb detonated in a Moscow suburb this morning, killing General Yaroslav Moshkalik, a high-ranking officer in the Russian army. The Kremlin blames Ukraine, but their security services have not officially confirmed any involvement in targeted assassinations of Russian military figures. In the heart of the city, undeterred, President Vladimir Putin met US envoy Steve Witkoff for the 4th time.
How are you, Mr. President?
The Kremlin declared the 3-hour meeting constructive, with discussions about the possibility of direct peace talks between Ukraine and Russia. On his way to the Pope's funeral, where he could see Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, Trump sounded cautiously optimistic.
I think Russia and Ukraine, I think they're coming along, we hope. Very fragile.
Looming over both sides is his threat to abandon all peace efforts if genuine progress isn't made.
He is genuine when he says he wants this terrible war to end in Ukraine, but it is wrapped up in the first term, in the Russiagate investigations. There's this real ingrained hostility there, quite separate from the issue of who started this conflict and who's to blame.
In Kyiv, Zelensky faced the ongoing reality of war. Yesterday, another 12 were killed in a missile strike prompting even rare condemnation of Putin by Trump. But Zelensky is also having to contend with internal doubters after the mayor of Kyiv, former boxer Vitaly Klitschko, suggested they may have to give up Russian-occupied land like Crimea to secure peace.
An unconditional ceasefire opens an opportunity to talk about everything, and we are ready for a dialogue in any format. Temporarily occupied territories are just temporarily occupied, but they all belong to Ukraine and Ukrainian people.
Zelensky says Russia has not clearly signalled it's ready to end the war, but despite the losses, he too seems unwilling publicly to make any territorial concessions for peace. Vincent McAviney, Global News, London.
Ahead, climate chill. Donald Trump has bumped climate change off the election's radar. How some Canadians are trying to change that. Messi mania on full display in Vancouver last night. Soccer fans swarmed the city to see the Argentine superstar play in what was the first leg of a highly anticipated CONCACAF Champions Cup clash between the Whitecaps and Inter Miami, especially after Lionel Messi snubbed Vancouverites last time around. A record-breaking crowd of more than 53,000 packed the stadium. And even though one of the greatest players of all time was on the pitch for the entire match, the Whitecaps won. It was a top ballot box issue 4 years ago, but climate policy has received little attention this election cycle. The threat of Donald Trump's tariffs, along with inflation and affordability, have made things like carbon pricing politically poisonous. But that doesn't mean the crisis has gone away, and for some voters, nothing is more important. Heather Urex West reports.
Bringing attention to Canada's melting glaciers, one death-defying performance at a time, climate change has always been close to aerialist Sasha Galitsky's heart. But last summer, the crisis broke her heart completely.
Since the fire, it's been a nightmare. I wouldn't wish this on anyone.
Galitsky was one of about 2,000 residents of Jasper, Alberta, to lose their home in a wildfire that destroyed 30% of the mountain town. It's why she says climate policy is so important to her in this federal election.
It's not just me and my neighbors who lost our homes, it's other members of the community.
The mayor of Princeton, BC, feels the same way. His community of about 3,000 has been on the front lines of the climate crisis.
We've been dealing with emergencies year after year since 2017. We had flooding in the region and forest fires.
With damage over the years in the tens of millions, Mayor Coyne says he's frustrated climate policy has received so little attention in this election cycle. It's why he and more than 200 other municipal leaders from across the country signed an open letter to the federal parties urging them to make climate policy a priority.
I don't care if you agree with or believe in climate change or not, the climate events are growing.
But on this topic, the two leading federal parties have been mostly silent. The Liberals joining the Conservatives in distancing themselves from the deeply unpopular consumer carbon tax, as both Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney focus on growing the economy and developing Canada's oil and gas sector instead.
We know that the climate crisis is going to have economic impacts that are much larger than those of the tariffs.
Because politically palatable or not, the escalating climate crisis isn't going away. Heather Urex West, Global News, Calgary.
Next, Canadians gather at the Vatican ahead of the Pope's funeral on Saturday. Political leaders and heads of state from around the world are arriving in Rome for Pope Francis's funeral on Saturday. A group of cardinals led a ceremony to seal his coffin tonight after the third and final day of the pontiff lying in state in St. Peter's Basilica. Many Canadians were among those paying their final respects, from pilgrims to bishops and Indigenous leaders. Redmond Shannon reports.
The tomb of Pope Francis being prepared in Rome's Basilica of St. Mary Major. On the other side of the river in Vatican City, the focus of tens of thousands was to bid their farewell to the pontiff.
Those who are part of this huge line on Friday afternoon are among the very last to see Pope Francis lying in state.
In Inside St. Peter's Basilica, ushers move the crowds through quickly.
There's no way I was not going to stop. So I stood there and I stopped. They were trying to move me. I wouldn't move.
Manitoba Métis Federation President David Chartrand met Francis here 3 years ago with a Métis delegation. The Pope asked for forgiveness for the Church's role in residential school abuse.
One of the things that always touches my heart and made many cry is he shook everyone's hand. Not just me as the president, he shook everyone's hand. And some of them were shedding tears. Tears were dropping onto his hand.
Months later, Francis travelled to Canada, making his historic residential schools apology.
And he was bold enough to come forward and do an apology right in our backyard. So that's something we will honour forever.
Calgary Bishop William McGrattan says it's a privilege for him to be here to honour a man that so many worshippers felt so close to.
How he has sort of led the church in addressing issues of marginalization, how he's tried to work towards Christian unity, interreligious dialogue. The fact that he has reached out to people who suffer has been amazing.
On Friday evening, a group of cardinals led a private service to seal the Pope's coffin. The funeral begins at 10 a.m. local time Saturday, when much of Rome will come to a standstill. Colleen?
Redmond Shannon in Rome. Thank you, Redmond. And that is Global National for this Friday. I'm Colleen Christie. Tonight's Your Canada showcases Athabasca Glacier in Alberta, Tobin Lake in Saskatchewan, and the coast of Conception Bay in freshwater Newfoundland and Labrador. Keep them coming. Send your pictures of Canadian pride to globalnational@globalnews.ca. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Good night.